And welcome back to another episode of the Cool Your Jets podcast. We're Ben Blessington and Michael Nania. Michael, day 2 of free agencies in the books. The Jets targeted their defensive backfield, and I think you and I are both pretty happy with the two guys they brought in.
Absolutely. This was a really good second day of free agency. Obviously, defense was going to be the focus after only signing offensive players on the first day. And I think they did a really good job. The two players that they signed are not only are they starters, but starting quality players that plug holes, but they're good scheme fits. And I think both of them had the potential to be, well above average starters, big time difference makers. So this was a very productive second day for sure.
If you were to go back to the end of our last podcast, I think we made some predictions, and I think you and I both felt that they would land Marcus Williams. Just there was a lot of smoke to that fire. All the beat reporters were talking about it. We did mention that with these signings, a lot of times the reported number that they might get is driven up by the agent. So Williams ended up getting less than was reported, which I think was what you and I expected. He ended up getting $14 million per year. I would bet that the Jets probably, it's not like I have any sources on this, but I would imagine the Jets probably offered that or less. They probably matched that, and then he went with the contender. But Douglas is, his 3 off seasons in charge. He's made it very clear that he draws the line in the sand and he's not going to go past it, no matter how good of a player he is. Michael, I know you were pretty bummed about missing out on Marcus Williams. I'm not. Obviously he's a great player, but I'm not as bummed about not investing, premium resources into safety. But I guess let's start chronologically with the day. The first big domino to fall today was missing out on Marcus Williams. So what were your thoughts on that? And then eventually how the Jets rebounded?
Yeah, so I think it was definitely surprising once the number came out because, there were rumors up at least 17 million. There were some, up to 20. I think I saw one report saying. So, when it came out that he only got 5 for 70, and we say only in quotes because it's still, like tied for the biggest safety contract or second biggest. But it was a lot less than I think we expected. So it was surprising because it seemed like the Jets are interested and they're just trying to get the number down. So for the Ravens to swoop in and get him, because I definitely would have signed up for 14 million per year for Williams. I think it was 5 for 70 with 38 million guaranteed. So a very big contract, but I think I would have signed up for it. But obviously that's not how free agency works, where it's just, are you willing to pay this price? It's not like you're just going to Walmart and shopping. And, Walmart does have a representative that used to play for the Jets. His name is Jamal Adams, who is a well below average safety at this point.
We were talking about that before the podcast, that Jamal has put out no tweets since Russell Wilson.
Yeah, I don't know. His only, comment on his franchise crumbling around him is hashtag Perez, hashtag Walmart fan. But
yeah, he has a Walmart sponsorship going on.
But alas, that is another team's problem now. But anyway, yeah, it's not like you're just going around shopping, spending money. The free agent gets to choose where he wants to go. So, and I said this on Twitter, but I think, the Jets have improved their reputation with their culture and, Robert Saleh and Douglas and everything they've done. And I think that contributed to helping them get CJ Uzomah and Laken Tomlinson. I think they've stepped up in that department, but still at the same time, they won 6 games over the past 2 years, and they're going to lose some bidding wars to teams like the Ravens that have a much more established reputation. And there are going to be some situations where they have to overpay a little bit if they want a guy. And Joe Douglas has clearly shown that he's never going to do that, for better or worse. So I think that's just what happened here. They weren't going to overpay for this player, and he decided to go to the more established team, especially one that has in the Ravens just a very storied culture of defensive back play and defensive play in general. So that was probably the last team that the Jets would want to compete against for his services. But it was disappointing based on the number. I would have been open to bring him in at that cost, but it is what it is. I think that's just how Douglas operates, and in the long run, it is for the better to operate with that mentality. You're going to save a lot of money over the years, and that's why the Jets can continue to spend right now, is because Douglas hasn't gone out and signed every single free agent the last 2 years, and they'll have flexibility next year and for the years to come because he's managed it so well. And you got to take some losses to do that with players like Marcus Williams, Joe Thuney last year, whoever it may be. But it really helps you maintain that long-term flexibility. So I would have been open to signing him for that, but this is just a consequence of the Jets being this team that is still has ways to go to beat teams like the Ravens out for star players.
Yeah,
So it was surprising once I saw the number, but it's something you can live with. It's not the end of the world. Joe Douglas has still been aggressive, as we saw on day one, as we saw at the rest of day two. So it's not as if he's being cheap. It's just he's a line in the sand guy. Star player chose a better team. That's the end of it.
Yeah, you touched on reputation a little bit. That's a big part of what Joe Douglas is also doing, is that for years, agents have used the Jets to drive up the price of their players' contracts. You saw it with Kirk Cousins a few years ago. McCagnon was the biggest victim of this. And agents knew that the Jets were going to have to overpay, like you said, if they wanted to come to the Jets. And Joe Douglas is changing the reputation of the Jets around the league with these agents of, look, we have our offer, our line in the sand. If it's the best offer that you get, you're going to be a Jet. If it's not, then, happy trails. But I think that's the right modus operandi for this team. I think any team that is a big spender in free agency, a lot of times that first year, maybe they increase their win total by a few wins, but long-term, it never really works out. This team is always going to be built through the draft. But the way that they've used free agency through the first 2 days, you have to love. And obviously we're going to talk about the guys they signed today, but looking at it, as a whole, all 4 guys that they've signed have all been a part of Super Bowl peering teams. They've all made Super Bowl runs. DJ Reed and Laken Tomlinson with the 49ers in 2019, Jordan Whitehead with the Tampa Bay Bucks in 2020, and then Uzama with the Bengals in 2021. They've brought in 4 guys who are veterans, who have been there, who have won big playoff games. And that's something that I think this young team was missing last year. And it's the next step in the rebuild. Is last year that, 2 years ago, they tore it all down. It was very frugal with how they were going to spend their money. They weren't going to go after really any guys who weren't long-term plays. Last year was more aggressive. They spent more money, but again, they were looking for the guys who were 25, 26. And this year, while they're still looking for that, i.e. Jordan Whitehead, they were more open to bringing in guys who were, maybe on their third contract, guys who are 29, 28, 30. So they can bring that high character, that veteran leadership into this locker room. I really like what the Jets have done. I know you and I were both on the Terrell Edmonds train, but you and I both said that, look, Jordan Whitehead, Terrell Edmonds, I think that is the way to go. I preferred going that route and pairing it with a corner than going all in for Marcus Williams. Obviously, Marcus Williams is a great player, but the fact that they got DJ Reed and Jordan Whitehead for, I think it comes out to, like, if you add it up, their average per year, I think it's like $18 million. Instead of paying Marcus Williams that 14, or if they were going to have to beat Baltimore, maybe they would have gone up to 15 or 16 million. You probably wouldn't end up with DJ Reed, unless Joe Douglas is really wanting to spend. What were your thoughts on Jordan Whitehead? We'll start there. Obviously, I know you're a big Reed fan, and he was actually first, but because we're on the topics of safeties, it seems like maybe they were waiting on Williams. Once Williams said no, then they pivoted to the rest of the defensive backfield. Whitehead seemed to be their guy. What are your thoughts on his usage and how he fits in with this Robert Saleh defense?
Oh, yeah. In terms of the signing, I think this is definitely where I think you and I both wanted them to go post Williams, in this, sort of mid-tier strong safety group where there were a lot of solid options like Edmonds, Whitehead, Ron Curse, a lot of solid starters at the, strong safety position, more box type players. So completely different than Williams, but still safeties. And they were able to do that. So it was definitely a pleasant sight to see as soon as I saw the news that they signed him. But looking at him more since they've signed him, and I knew going in, he's box safety, hard hitter. Most of his value comes from tackles for loss, making plays in the run game. But looking into him more, it doesn't seem like he's a really good fit. And I did an article a week or a couple of weeks ago looking at the free agent safeties who were the best fit to fill Marcus May's role, just in terms of how they were used, where they were lined up. And Jordan Whitehead was up there. And then watching him a little bit more, you and I are both actually watching his game against the Jets in week 17. You could see not only May, but very Jamal Adams like role, especially playing in Todd Bowles' defense, where that's obviously a part of it. What Bowles does, he moves around a lot. You'll see him rushing off the edge. You'll see him, as a straight up off ball linebacker. as part of like when they'll go into they'll have three linebackers out there, and he'll be one of them, just standing on the outside off the ball. He'll he lined up in the slot a few times, covering Barrios, and would blitz out of the slot, and he'll still go deep sometimes and be a cover two safety. So he could do a lot of different things, but it's mostly in the box, and that's where he makes his big plays, just shooting downhill, busting up screens, end arounds. That's what he does really. That's the most consistent skill I've seen from him. Anything horizontal, like an end around, jet sweep, a quarterback run against the Panthers. He had some good stops on Cam Newton. Those are the type of plays he's really good at, just busting those tight end wide receiver blocks and getting the backfield, making those big plays. Fifth most tackles for loss among safeties since he was drafted, with 22 of those. So he's getting over 5 a year, which is really good. So that's where you're getting most of the value from him. In coverage, it's kind of the same thing. His man coverage is not good in terms of the coverage skills, but when he gets to play zone, just sit back there, cover the flat, and just break downhill, make those plays. He's very good. He's one of the best zone coverage safeties last year for that reason, for his ability to get downhill. So I think he's a really good fit to fill that Marcus May role, what May was doing for them last season. He brings physicality and edge to this defense that they did not have in the secondary last year. They really didn't. We focus on the coverage, but the run defense in the secondary was bad last year. And we'll talk about Reed too. He also checks this box tremendously, but with Whitehead, you're getting an enforcer, a guy who loves to hit, makes his presence felt, makes his presence felt, and is a guy who gets down in the box and really can contribute like he's another box player, and is not just like last year the Jets safeties would get down there, whether it's Ashton Davis, Sherrod Niesman, whoever, other than May, who was decent. And it's like having another defensive back in there, and they'll get pushed around, they'll miss tackles, but Whitehead will get in there, and it's like having another linebacker in there, a guy who can actually take on blocks, fill gaps, make plays. So it's going to be huge for the run defense. So that's where I think you're getting the most value here, improving that run defense, getting an enforcer, some physicality in the box, then also in zone coverage, covering the underneath parts of the field.
Yeah, and the thing that I found interesting was that there was some rumblings that the Jets would be interested in bringing back Marcus May. Actually, while you were talking, Michael, Marcus May decided to go sign with the Saints. Figured I should let you know that.
Interesting.
Yeah, I which I think you and I were talking before. I thought that was curious that they were interested in bringing him back because of obviously 29 coming off the Achilles. There was the whole DUI thing where he didn't tell the team, etc. But he's going to New Orleans, and that'll work out. I love Whitehead. The one thing, I do trust Todd Bowles to develop safeties. He's had a real clear track record of developing safeties, and obviously he's had some talented guys. But the fact that they were able to steal one of his young ones, he's only 24, he'll be 25 on Friday. He's a great player. And like you said, the defensive backs were really terrible against the run. And both guys that they brought in today are going to help that out. The Jets still need to make a move at defensive tackle, maybe even linebacker, to really shore up that run defense. But having Whitehead is going to help the run defense tremendously. I am interested to see how they use him, because even just in the little bit that you and I were watching, Michael, I mean, Todd Bowles did really try to use him like his Jamal Adams. I mean, he put him at the at the line of scrimmage a lot. He put him in the box. He was blitzing him a lot. So obviously the staff is comfortable and feels that he can do a lot of the things that they require out of their safeties. But I think you are going to see him a lot in the box, playing downhill, being that enforcer. I have to say he is one of the hardest, if not the hardest hitter in the league. And so that's always great, to hype up the team. And I think he is going to be a real tone setter for this defense. And I think that is one of the big themes that you've seen with at least two of their signings between him and Tomlinson. They've really added some attitude to this team, which I think they kind of lacked. They kind of got pushed around. And I think with those two guys, you're going to see a different feeling when watching Jets games, hopefully. I like Whitehead a lot. At the time, I preferred Edmonds because I thought he was slightly better in coverage. Although, Michael, as you were pointing out, that their coverage grades are actually maybe a little bit closer than we thought, especially in zone coverage, like you were just talking about. So I like the fit. And obviously, anytime you add a 24-year-old who has incredibly high ceiling and is already playing at a high level, who's won a Super Bowl, I mean, what's not to like there? I think at the safety position, I think they're probably done. The fact that they were interested in bringing back May maybe suggests maybe they aren't. Maybe they'll they'll keep sniffing around that market. Maybe they will go after another, guy like Jaquaski Tart or Terrell Edmonds or whatever. But I think likely they're probably done in free agency. They have Joyner, they have Whitehead. Obviously, you got Pinnock and Davis and Will Parks on the bench. And then I think you'll see them draft a free safety to compete with Joyner. And I think you have to like that position. That's kind of how I would view the safety position. Instead of giving Marcus Williams $15-16 million, assuming you had to beat the Ravens offer, you give Jordan Whitehead a 2-year deal, very reasonable contract. From his perspective, it makes a lot of sense. He's going to hit the open market when he's 26 and he can really cash in again. But was it $7.5 million per year or $7 million per year? So just getting paid slightly more than Braxton Berrios. I think it's a great deal for the Jets. I really love having an enforcer in that back end. I think that's just something that they've really missed. And we finally have a new 33. And I think this 33 might be, I don't want to say better than the old 33, but at least maybe less of a nut job than the old 33. Speaking of the old 33, his teammate in Seattle, obviously one of the worst pass coverage defenses in the league. So maybe when you first saw this signing, you didn't really know the name. You saw Seahawks defensive back. You questioned it. You saw he was 5'9". You questioned it. But Michael, the more you dig into DJ Reed, you see how the Jets really landed an absolute stud of a corner.
Yeah, this guy is good. And I just continue to kick myself as to why I wasn't talking about this guy more. I think I was just kind of writing off the idea that they would pursue a corner just because they didn't last year. They ran out, a bunch of late round picks. They had bigger needs. But if I were, I definitely would have been kind of driving his fan club a little bit harder because there is a lot to like about this guy. Numbers wise, it's all there. Coverage, run defense, tackling. He's a complete package. And he was really, really good last year. Like he wasn't just above average or a good starter. He was top 10 in a lot of coverage stats. In terms of yards per cover snap, I believe he was 6th best among qualified corners. Passer rating allowed 7th best. Yards per target 12th best. This is out of 96 qualified corners. So he was very productive for them last year. But what I really love, and I alluded to it earlier, is that he's great against the run, and they needed that. The run defense, and obviously that's not the top priority for corner, but like I just said,
that's the first thing you mentioned from a corner. I mean, that's when we read the scouting reports of those guys for mock drafts, and it's just great against the run. It's like, all right, click off. Next guy.
Right. All right, next guy. Great tackler. Weaknesses, coverage. Okay, next. But no, that's why I mentioned the coverage stats first, just to let you know he is good in coverage. But I love his run defense. Last 2 years, he was the number 1 graded run defender at PFF in 2020, number 4 this year, 4th most tackles against the run this year with 29. So he's making almost 2 tackles against the run a game as an outside corner, which is absurd. And he only missed 1 tackle against the run all year. And then I watched a couple games of him that I was able to get in the few hours after they signed him. And you could just see the activity. He's willing to take on those blocks from receivers. He's good at shedding them, sets the edge really well, peels off at the right time, and doesn't let those, good, solid 7 to 9 yard runs turn into anything more than that. They really needed that. So that's key. But this is a cornerback we're talking about. Coverage is important. And he's a very good zone corner. He played more zone than pretty much any corner in the league, 2nd lowest. Only 15% of his snaps are in man coverage from according to PFF. And, he's mostly playing zone, and watching him, he just has, really good feel for passing off routes. He knows, carry the route, pass it off, get back into the flat, make the tackle in the flat. Good feel for doing that. And then I thought he's really good when he did have to man up, really good at turning and running with guys on vertical routes. He gets on top of it, has good speed to run with them. When you're 5'9" on the outside, you've got to have some speed to make up for it. And he does have that, I feel like. And then his tackling is pretty good as well. Obviously, he's able to do in the run game, translates to the pass game as well. So I really like the signing. The production is all there. And I'm not going to say my film watching of the 2 games that I watched in the past couple hours is gospel or anything, but it did align with these numbers. I saw the willingness against the run. I saw him earning these coverage numbers with actually, winning his matchup, preventing targets. Then when he was targeted, having a good nose for the ball in terms of making the target contested and difficult, which led to, there were some plays where he didn't necessarily make the pick or the deflection, but because he had tight coverage, it was just a difficult catch for the receiver. So I'm a big fan of this signing for a lot of reasons. I think this has the potential to be the best value signing out of all the ones they've made this year so far.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, I mean, 2 games of watching him, he was a guy that really flew under the radar for us. You started to mention him, I think, like 2 or 3 days ago. You're like, wait, why are we not talking about DJ Reed? This guy's actually really good. And the more you looked into it, the more you kept liking him. So I am curious to see, the more you get time to watch more of his games and look into his numbers, how your thoughts change him. But it seems like everybody who's really looked into it and watched the film has to like, what they've seen. And the other metric, and I tweeted this out, I think yesterday, a great way to judge a free agent signing is how sad the former team's fan base is to lose him. And Seahawks fans are absolutely pissed.
Yeah, that was, and I know you brought that up yesterday, and they've been checking that box with everyone they signed, but I think this one is with DJ Reed is number one in terms of the most disappointed reaction.
Definitely. Because the other ones, it was like Uzama was like, all right, they were definitely really sad to lose him, but it's like, all right, he's 29. We got to save money for Burrow and Chase. Okay. Whitehead, it's like, okay, we brought back Brady and all, Jensen and Carlton Davis, just wasn't enough money to go around. So they were sad, but also like, understandable. Tomlinson, kind of same thing where it's like, but this was the one where it's like the Seahawks fans felt like, look, we gave Will Disley all that money. We gave Quandre Diggs the money. It's like, this is legitimately a very good cornerback. The interesting thing that I saw, and this prompted a whole topic on Jets Twitter, and I'm sure this is something we'll be talking about all offseason. The picture will get clearer with the draft is Reed specifically, he got a lot better this season when he switched from left cornerback to right cornerback. There's a whole blurb from Pete Carroll talking about how he said he's more comfortable there. It makes sense. I mean, everything. It's the same thing where I don't want to say kind of worried. I don't want to be Debbie Downer, but just it is a question mark. Is like, okay, how effective will Laken Tomlinson be at right guard? Because it is an adjustment. Believe it or not, it's not just the same position. Everything's flipped. It's like if you're a boxer going from orthodox to southpaw, like everything is completely different. But I think the Jets were clearly comfortable with Tomlinson. With Reed, he's a guy that has been very explicit about his comfort level at right cornerback. The Jets right cornerback last year was Eccles. Left cornerback was Hall. Again, they could still draft somebody. The rumblings are that they see that they're not as high on Hall, that they see Hall, Eccles, and Dunn as kind of the same level, and they want them all to compete. I don't know if I buy that. And I know that comes from reporters who reportedly have sources in the building, although they've, some have been off a little bit with some of the reports recently. But do you buy that, Michael? Because all the numbers and all the film, Hall was, by every metric outside of the 2 interceptions, one of which was, like you said to me, a punt from Tom Brady and, Michael Carter II pointing out to jump the route pre-snap. Outside of interceptions, Hall beats him by every metric. And I know there's the athleticism, but it's like there are plenty of great athletes that aren't great corners. And like Darrelle Revis wasn't the best athlete in the world. Obviously, he was a great athlete, but that's not why he was an amazing corner. So it's like, I don't know if I buy that. There are plenty of great corners. Like Richard Sherman, I mean, he's a physical freak, but so is Hall in terms of size and length and whatever. But it's not like he was the fastest or twitchiest guy in the world. So I don't really buy that. It's like, oh, just purely because Eccles is maybe a little twitchier and faster that he has the higher ceiling. It's like, didn't Hall have like 17 pass breakups last year? Like, Are we forgetting how good he played at times last year?
Yeah, I agree with you. And look, first of all, like, we'll give some credence to the reports, and DJ even came on during his episode a few weeks ago, and he said that's what he's been hearing, that they're not as high in Hall as some fans might be, that they see them as equals, maybe even like Eccles a little bit more. So he's obviously not making it up. So I'm going to give some credence to it. But just looking at the way they played last year, it wasn't particularly close. I mean, Eccles obviously made the picks, but I mean, it was 2 interceptions. It's not like he was JC Jackson or anything. And outside of that, Hall just clears him in every single category. I mean, Hall had a great season, but not great. Let's say good season. Outside of not getting any picks.
You know what, Michael? I know you don't want to say great season, but in terms of being a 5th round draft pick, new scheme and what our expectations were going into the season. I mean, there's all these reports that saying the Jets aren't high on Hall, but it's like they literally went into last season making no significant upgrades at corner. So they had to have had some sort of faith in him. And it's not like he had a bad enough season to disprove that. So for
Yeah.
expectation wise, I thought he had a great season.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And like you said, I think like there was obviously competition going on, but he was the one guy who were like, okay, he's gonna be starting. It kind of seemed like the other players were competing for the spot opposite him. Then you go into the year and he doesn't disprove it. He was second in the league in pass forcing completions among all corners. So even though he wasn't picking off the ball, he had a lot of big time pass deflections, multiple of them in the end zone. You think of the one in the Bengals game against Higgins. He had one in the Titans game. And this is just right off the top of my head, multiple saved touchdowns. And his overall numbers in terms of yards per cover snap, above average. His tackling was very good. He had very few missed tackles. And Eccles, on the other hand, he made the picks, but I mean, like, let's be honest about that Dolphins game for a second. He had that one pass deflection where he was absolutely roasted for a touchdown, but Tua underthrew it. And, he caught up, and recovered for it, but still. And he also had 5 missed tackles in the run game in that game. 5 in one game. That's very bad. So, and look, he showed flashes. And again, for a 6th-round pick, home run for a 6th-round pick, good depth piece, good athlete potential, all those things. But in terms of comparing these two guys side to side, I think Hall's already shown he's a solid starting cornerback, whereas Eccles, I think, has shown he's a NFL cornerback who's a good depth piece, but not necessarily a starter yet. So, and another thing is that at the end of the season, the Jets switched up their usage with Hall, and they showed some confidence to move him around a little bit, allow him to switch sides, allow him to follow top receivers. After that Bills game where they were criticized for not doing so, they allowed Hall to do that and showed that confidence in him. So I don't buy it. I honestly don't. Like, not that the reports are made up. I'm sure that there are some people in the building who must feel that way, or else this wouldn't be out there. But there's just too much evidence that Hall is substantially better than Eccles for me to believe that they see them that way. And then with this signing, with DJ Reed, who's clearly a better player on the right side, there's a quote that I shared on Twitter from Pete Carroll where he very explicitly stated that that Reed was playing better on the right side, and that he himself would probably admit it, that he's more comfortable there. It seems more seamless that you throw him in on the right side, leave Hall on the left. So that's how I see it. But we'll see if they do compete. If Hall and Eccles get a chance to compete, and we'll see how it plays out. But I definitely think that it seems like a very easy fit to just have Reed come in on the right side and Hall keeps place on the left.
Yeah, funnily enough, I mean, another free agent that Joe Douglas signed from Seattle had explicitly said that he was more comfortable on one side and the Jets played him on the other side. And that's George Fant, who came out and said, I'm more comfortable at left tackle. I want to play left tackle. I'm signing to play left tackle. And then the Jets drafted Mekhi Becton. He's playing right tackle. And, 2020 wasn't a horrible season from George Fant, but you clearly saw him get better in 2021. That's obviously a topic we're going to talk a lot about this offseason. The only thing I can think about with the Hall and Eccles thing, because there's so much smoke there that there has to be some sort of fire, you'd imagine. I don't think it's on field. It's either maybe it's in the practice field or, in the facility in terms of watching film. The only thing I can think of is maybe they just don't think Hall is enough of a dog, like that he isn't enough of an alpha. That's the only thing that Hall they're just, maybe Eccles has that edge, or there's just something that they're seeing on a day-to-day basis that we as fans don't see for those reports to come out, because it is unfair for us to, not be in the facility and say that. It's not like anybody on the team has come out and slandered Bryce Hall. Every time Robert Saleh or Jeff Ulbrich has talked about him, they've been nothing but sung his praises. But if those reports are true, that's the only thing I can think of, is that they're seeing something on a day-to-day basis that makes them think that Eccles has the higher ceiling. At the very least, though, with this signing, the depth got a whole lot better. I think you're not pigeonholed into taking a corner at 10. I think it's more likely that the Jets will pivot to wide receiver at 10. I'm not, look, if Sauce Gardner's there as their top player on the board, I'm sure they would explore taking him. And then it's like, then you got a really deep cornerback group, because then you got, Sauce across from DJ Reed. You have Bryce Hall sitting on the bench. Maybe, I guess Michael Carter II has that slot job locked up. So I guess, you can't really touch him. The one thing that I have noticed too is that the Jets, the one concern I guess I would say is that the Jets have signed some smaller DBs. But DJ Reed obviously doesn't play like that. As you mentioned him, he's a tenacious player. That would be the only concern I have about the signings that they've made, or the DBs that they have. Like Michael Carter II isn't very tall. DJ Reed isn't very tall. Marcus Joyner and Whitehead's a average size for a safety, and also a menace on the field. So you don't have to really worry about that. But overall, Michael, I think you have to be pretty happy with these two signings. As we look towards, I want to come back to some of the stuff, but I figure we should talk about looking ahead the rest of the week, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Obviously, it sounds like these signings are going to slow down. It sounds like these are the four main signings for the Jets. I think you will see, another like Sheldon Rankins type of signing that we saw last year that came on, like, I think it was like a Thursday or Friday. Where do you think the Jets could go next? I think they will sign a few more guys in free agency. Do you have any inkling on the position groups that you think they might target? Are there any guys still out there that you really hope the Jets go after?
I mean, obviously at this point, I think it's clear that the big signings are over and it's time to, scrape the bargain bin. I think linebacker is one that's interesting. Miles Jack was released. I'm not sure how much he'll go for if he's within their price range at this point, but there are a lot of connections there. Robert Saleh was the linebackers coach in Jacksonville when he was drafted. Jeff Ulbrich coached him at UCLA, and Michael Piron's his cousin. So that's interesting. They just want to add another piece to the linebacker room. But I think linebacker for some depth there. Maybe they also re-signed Nathan Shepard today. So, I mean, that's your lone keeper for the 2018 class.
I forgot to mention that.
Your fourth string, 80-year-old defensive tackle is all you got.
Well, yeah, I had that tweet. Class. I had that tweet that.
That was a genius tweet. I didn't even realize that.
That Jordan Whitehead is younger now that the Jets are signing him than Nathan Shepard was when he was drafted by the Jets, which is just
absolutely wild.
that is wild. I think that's the thing about Douglas is he's just been exceedingly competent. And I got into a bit of a debate about this with somebody who, I can understand why there's a segment of the Jets fan base that is frustrated with Douglas because the results in the field have been awful. But I said something along the lines of, grade the process, not the result, which isn't entirely true. Like, obviously, if the Jets keep winning 2 games every season, he's got to go. Like, you can't just keep putting up those type of results on the field. But I think when you look at the process that Douglas has implemented since he inherited an utter dumpster fire, and more so than I think you would argue to realize that they were in, and being saddled with Gase for a year, when you look at it, every single move he's made outside of some of the picks in the 2020 draft class. And I guess the verdict is still out on Becton or Wilson. So you can put that aside. But outside of that, I've really loved the last 2 off seasons that he's had. I have to say, I think he's done a really good job with just being smart with how he's spending. I mean, you look at the 4 signings that they got, this was exactly the type of free agency period that you or I were talking about last week and saying, this is the type of period we think they'll have and that we want them to have. Bring in several good starters on this team. You don't have to go and spend crazy money, on those JC Jacksons or those Allen Robinsons or somebody like that, or I guess Christian Kirk. Just bring in good, solid players. And they got 4 guys, 3 of whom who have experience in the system, which you raised a really interesting point that they didn't really do that last offseason when we thought they would. Last offseason, we were circling all the former Niners and some of the Green Bay guys, and I don't think they signed any of them. And then this year, there's been a very clear emphasis, and I think you'll see a few more of those, especially when they not bargain bin, but those day 4, day 5 signings. I think you might see a few more former Niners or whatever, or former Falcons, just guys who overlapped. What have your thoughts been on Joe Douglas and Co's, their plan thus far through 2 days?
I mean, I was thinking about this earlier, what you were just talking about in terms of evaluating Douglas individually, because you look at the product on the field and 6 wins in 2 years is about as bad as it gets, but it doesn't feel like Douglas has been nearly that bad just within the moves that he's making, the plans he's had. I think they've just been bogged down by very bad injury luck and bad quarterback play, really, in terms of why they haven't won the past couple of years. But the pieces are there and they are coming together. It really feels like that it is. Obviously, we're biased to an extent, but I feel like even objectively, you can look at it and be like, okay, there's a plan here. There's good positional valuation. There's good support for the quarterback. There's a talent that fits the coaching staff's visions. There's a positive culture. Like there's real team building stuff going on here. It's not like here's Le'Veon Bell, here's CJ Mosley, and just getting named talent. Like there's method to the madness with what he's been doing.
Yeah.
And hopefully comes together this season, and our optimism is proven correct. But I think like you can really see it never is. It never is.
100 reasons to really even Sam Darnold.
Yeah, that's a rough one. I'll own it though. I'll own it. But yeah, like you could see a realistic path to winning. Like, okay, this is what it looks like to build a winning team. Get a franchise quarterback, support him, defensively, have a vision, a scheme where everyone's on the same page, and then get talent that fits it. And, mix veterans with youth, give youth a chance to develop. Like they're doing a lot of good things. So we'll have to see if it comes together. Hopefully they can stay healthy enough for it too. I was thinking about this earlier, but they signed four random signings I liked last year. Carl Lawson, Corey Davis, LaMarcus Joyner, and Vinnie Curry. Out of 68 possible games those guys could have played, they played 10. That's absolutely ridiculous. So like hopefully they get better luck than that this year. We can actually see these guys play this year. Yeah, all those were Davis. One of them was Joyner in his 2 snaps or whatever he played, and then 9 of Corey Davis. So
yeah, I think that has to be. People don't acknowledge that enough when they're talking about the offseason that Douglas had last year. It's like if Carl Lawson was healthy, the Jets would have won a few more games. I mean, by the training camp that he was having. I mean, you got to see him in training camp, right?
Yeah, and he was electric, and it's all we heard out of camp. From the reports of the people who are there consistently, and even Beck didn't miss the entire season. So the injuries can be used as an excuse to an extent for every team, but there's no doubt that the Jets have been substantially worse than average with injury luck. So that's a big part of it, but we'll see. It seems like there's a plan in place. They got to continue drafting well. The 2020 class has got to bounce back. That's mainly on Becton. The 2021 class has to build on what it did last year. Great promise, great job getting playing time, getting in the starting lineup as rookies, but build on it, keep improving, become long-term keepers. And then this year, we'll see if they can get some year one impact out of it. And for years to come, if those guys can build on it. But it seems like regardless of the win totals, the past couple of years that Douglas has a clear plan, and not just Douglas, but the entire organization. They know what they're doing, and they're making moves that fit their vision. And we'll see if it plays out, but it definitely feels like there's a competent process in place.
Yeah, I think a plan is the biggest thing. It's the Jets keeps preaching the plan, and I think some people have rolled their eyes at the plan, but it's crucial. The Jets actually, it's very clear. I think it was easy for us to see last week or a month ago to kind of predict the type of free agency the Jets would have, because it's very clear to see the type of plan that the Jets have. And in the phrase I keep using to describe Douglas is exceedingly competent. Like the moves that he's making, the positions that he's investing in, all the things that you and I talk about, not just, like you and I are the know-it-alls, but like all the things that smart football minds on Twitter ignore us. Just anybody who objective people who analyze the team talk about, okay, how should the Jets build this? What should the Jets do? Everybody loves what the Jets are doing. And I think you have to like that. Look, how many games the Jets are going to win is really going to come down to Zach Wilson, but you have to really like what they're building around him. They still need to add that other receiver, around him. They still need to go add that other edge. But with 4 draft picks in the top 40, they can do that. And I think this team is going to look a lot better. I mean, it definitely will look a lot better than last year, but I think you're going to see a substantial jump, especially with these veterans that they brought in. You talk about that attitude. You talk about guys who have been to Super Bowls. I really think that there's a great free agent period for the Jets. And it's hard to compare it to other free agent periods that the Jets have had, because it seems like either they've gone balls to the walls and spent on, CJ Mosley, Le'Veon Bell, and Tremaine Johnson, or, going back, a decade on the, that 2010 offseason was like Santonio Holmes, LaDainian Tomlinson, just everybody. Or they've had offseasons where they've been in cap hell and they can't do anything. This is the first offseason that I can think of, unless you can think of one, Mike, where they've really been, they've made just smart, frugal. I mean, I guess last year with Douglas or whatever signing Lawson, but they've just made 4 really solid, good signings that you can't hate on. Like there's not really anything that the Jets have done that I haven't liked.
Right.
Outside of maybe missing out on DJ Jones, but then again, paying $10 million a year for a run stuff and defensive tackle probably doesn't make too much sense. You might be a little upset they didn't go for Marcus Williams, but who knows? If they go for Williams, maybe they don't go for Reed, and that seems like you're pretty high on Reed. So
yeah.
I don't know. I think, every time we get in this, I don't want to say every time, but a lot of times we get in this podcast, especially in the off season, and we gas it up and we're all optimistic, and then the season rolls around and the shit hits the fan and they're terrible again. But I really think you have to look at the process that the Jets have enacted under Joe Douglas, especially the last two off seasons. And you have to like the direction this franchise is headed in. It's impossible not to be excited about what the Jets are building. Does that mean the Jets are making the playoffs next year? I don't know. Probably not with how stacked the AFC is. And we say it every year, this is a 7-9 win team, but I really think that this is a team that's going to take a leap next year, like a legitimate leap. And it starts with this free agent class. I think he's done a great job so far. And I think there's some more moves to come. If you were to give a prediction on one more signing, and I think I should mention another thing happened while we were on the podcast, that the 49ers did give Azeez Al-Ashir a second-round tender, so I doubt that the Jets will go after him.
Right.
So before you give your answer on that, but a prediction on one more signing, or I guess you could say nobody. Who do you think it would be?
I think in terms of re-signings, offensive line depth is something to look at. So Dan Feeney is one to keep an eye on for sure. Morgan Moses also signed a 3-year, $15 million deal with the
Ravens.
Bear. Who was it?
Ravens.
Right. Yeah, so that's an option off the board. I actually think that's less than I thought he would get. Like, I'm not sure if he's going to start for them, but like for a backup, that's decent money. So they did re-sign Connor McDermott, but I think they can look at O-line depth. So I would expect that to be one of the next focuses. But to go off of what you were just talking about in terms of the optimism and how we spew it every single year, I mean, look, let's be honest. This is something that we invest a lot of time into, you and I think anyone who spends their time listening to me and you, two random people talking about the Jets, I think they're quite invested in this team as well.
If you've stooped to this level, you're also.
If you've stooped to this level, then you have a problem. You're in for life. You're not escaping. But the point is, like, we spend a lot of time with this. There's no reason to be, not that we both try to be as objective as possible, but when you spend this much time with something, like, being optimistic is the best way to do it. It's the only way to make that time worth it. It's like, why would you invest in something so much if you're just gonna be like, oh, these moves are terrible, this team is a joke, they're never gonna figure it out? Like, I think that's what I try to do. I try to be as objective as possible and give you real reasons to be optimistic, not just like, oh, this guy's great, he's great, everything's great. Just no real tangible reason. So that's what I try to do. I always have an optimistic tone, but also analyzing things in a real way to try to paint a realistic picture as to why it's going to happen, not just wishful thinking. But I think that's what makes this offseason different, is that it really feels like you don't have to do as much gymnastics and bending to figure out why it's going to work out. Like, it's like this is good stuff here.
Yeah, we don't have to make an Adam Gase film review podcast and try to talk ourselves.
Exactly. It's like these are good players. We have a good O-line, franchise quarterback, skill positions. Like, it's
and when they add that, I imagine number 4 is probably going to go to an edge. When you look at the defensive line the Jets are going to have next year, assuming they go edge at 4, which maybe isn't a given, but I think all signs point to that happening. It's like, let's just say, I think Trayvon Walker is probably the most likely, just how the board's fallen. But let's just say it's Trayvon Walker, JFM, Quinnen Williams, and Carl Lawson. I mean, that's a hell of a defensive line, and that's exactly the type of defensive line the Jets need for this defense to be good. But circling back to what you're saying, like, yeah, obviously the classic, like, sports talk radio, the Jets suck or they're never going to win, and this is a cursed franchise is never going to be good. But I think, yeah, it's important for us to definitely criticize the team when it's warranted, and not just always be flowery. This is amazing. And I think you're right. You do a good job of giving actual reasons. But here's a challenge for you, Michael. From the 4 free agents that the Jets have signed, I want you to be negative. We've been all optimistic, and there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic. But like any good philosopher, you have to present the counter argument to really get the whole picture. So try to nitpick here. Really try to dive into the deep, dark parts of your brain. And obviously don't like find stupid shit to bring up, but like actual reasons, because you find the positive stuff. Is there anything out of the 4 signings or that the Jets have done that you are maybe a little bit down on or wish they would have done differently?
That's a great question. I will get to that, but this reminds me of something I was thinking of earlier. I was looking back to, last year's signings, Davis, Lawson. I mean, a lot of them were injuries, but I was thinking not just last year, but any move they made in recent years, and think about how did I react to it at first, and then obviously most of them did not work out. So what was I missing that could have led me to see that it wasn't going to pan out or potentially would not work out? So this is kind of our way to do that right here. So I guess I'll start with CJ Uzama, who's not my least favorite of the 4 signings because I do like it. But probably, I guess it is my least favorite. I do like it, but it's not as I like the other ones more. That's all.
Right.
Right.
This is negative Nania. This is negative Nania. You can be negative.
So okay. I guess with Uzama, it's like I don't see, besides injuries, I don't see the floor being too low. Like, this is a guy who should give you your 400 yards, 4 touchdowns, decent blocking, whatever. Then I think
whatever, that would be like the best tight end season.
Yeah. I mean, I guess Herndon had a season like that, but yeah, like I guess I don't really.
And we were all calling him a future Pro Bowler.
Exactly. But I guess the only thing I just watch him and I look at his numbers, like drops. He's pretty average with drops. Contested catches, pretty average with that. Blocking, average. Like just a lot of average.
He's had some injury issues too
with him, and there's some injury issues. So I have a hard time seeing him being like, oh, this guy is just absolutely killing us. But I also can easily see him being a guy where it's like, well, I mean, he's there, and that's it. Like I could see that happening. But to round it out, some positivity. He definitely moves really well for a guy's size. Has great yak potential. Is very good tackle breaker, and that's where the upside comes from. So we'll see if he could tap into that.
Yeah.
Or if he's just going to be, a check down guy. So I guess that would be my negative outlook on him.
I want to get to the other 3, but the other thing is there's a common theme, and you see this with Uzama and all 4 signings, is the Jets are adding them on the upswing. That these are all 4 guys that are trending in the right direction, and sometimes that doesn't work out because maybe it's a fluky 1-year wonder thing or whatever. But all 4 of these guys are trending in the right direction. I think you have to like, that's like, Allen Robinson. That's a guy that's not trending in the right direction. And those type of signings are questionable. And a guy like Uzama, even though he's 29, the last 2 years are really especially this last year is really the year that he's kicked it into gear. And you could really see the potential with him in this offense. All right, so we saw some of the negatives, the potential pitfalls for Uzama. Now, Laken Tomlinson, what are the potential pitfalls when we look back? Let's say if it doesn't work out, what are some of the things that most of Jets Nation could be missing?
Well, I think the first thing that comes to mind is the age, and I don't want to be too positive in this section, but I will. I have to be. Optimism is
I want you to be yourself, but I'm just trying to find the negatives.
So I think, like you said with Uzama, like. Obviously, Thompson is another guy you signed who's up there in age. He's 30. But the last 2 years were his best 2 seasons of his career. So he is on the upswing despite his age. So that's positive. But at the same time, he is 30. So maybe they do get the downturn. And I'm also, not to put this evil out there, but you can't help but feel like a guy who has never missed a game due to injury is going to come to the Jets. And all that's going to come crashing down. And like I put out a post about it. It's like Tomlinson has never missed a game due to injury. And I saw I was getting so many replies and people are saying like, oh, you're jinxing him. You can't help but see that happening.
Who did that just happen with the Jets recently? Who came and had never missed a game? And it was CJ Mosley.
Mosley. I mean, had great durability coming to the Jets. And then he plays 2 games in 2 years. So obviously the second season is an aberration, but still. So I guess that would be my worry. The age, maybe the injury, luck coming to an end. But in terms of on-field, I have a hard time seeing him not being good in the run game. But I guess in the pass game, he's not as great as he is in the run game. He's usually above average. He has had some below average seasons, though, in terms of pressures. So I could see him especially in an offense like this where you're blocking for Zach Wilson. He might hold the ball a little bit long sometimes. I could see him potentially being a little bit disappointing in that phase. So I guess those would be my concerns. Do you have any downside concerns?
Mine would be him playing right guard, because
that's definitely a fair one.
Yeah, and that is one of those things where just kind of come out of nowhere. It's like, oh, this guy really is a better left guard than he is a right guard. There are some players like that. For whatever reason, the Jets don't have that concern. But it's still out there, so it's really not going to be something that's going to be able to be answered until, he's on the field. And also that he's not playing along. We don't know exactly who's going to be playing next to. It could be George Fant. It could be Mekhi Becton. It could be Ike Mekwonu. We don't really know. I don't think it'll be Ike Mekwonu. It'll either be Fant or Becton, but he's not playing alongside Trent Williams. So maybe that's, a potential. I'm not sure how much Trent Williams actually helped him, but we're trying to find the negatives. The other thing is that, Rich Cimini had a tweet when he got signed, and some of these ESPN analytics are a little off sometimes, but he had something where it said run block. He was 39th out of 68. Van Roten was 49th. Pass block, he was 14th out of 63. GVR was 47th. The film doesn't really back that up. The film points him out as
they said Tomlinson was 39th in the run game.
39th in the run game and 14th in the pass block.
Okay,
so
those ESPN win rate stats are very off base. I'm just going to say it. Even if it's something positive, you will never see me cite it for the Jets. It just doesn't really correlate with anything else.
I really do wonder what the math is behind that.
It's just, I think I read about it once. It's too basic to make sense. It's like a rigid, did you win in under 2.5 seconds? And that's how it is. And it's based on tracking. So they don't actually watch it to see what happens. It's just based on the location of the players on the field. So it's very unreliable, in my opinion.
Yeah, and also Thompson's a guy who's not necessarily, you pointed it out to me, it's not like he's the greatest athlete, but it's the angles that he takes that really establishes him as a blocker. And sometimes, one of the things I noticed when I watch him is sometimes it would be his recovery in a play that would really save him. A lot of times he would win a rep, but sometimes if he lost a rep, he kept fighting, and sometimes he would end up, still winning it by the end. And it's like those type of, plays don't really show up in the win rate stats. All right, let's move to Reed, who I know I think is he the highest? Is he the free agent you're the highest on?
I would say so. Yeah. I mean,
how would you rank him?
Tomlinson probably is higher floor, Reed higher ceiling. How would I rank him in terms
in terms of your excitement level for the four guys?
I would say, I guess we'll go with all four of the new players. So out of 10, Uzama 6, Tomlinson 9, Reed. I'll give Reed an equal 9 because I'm excited about O-line help and completing that. And then Whitehead, I'll say 8. So
okay,
similar to Tomlinson, but I just like the potential more because of the youth. But I guess in terms of downside, the biggest thing for me is he's a cornerback, and corner is probably the most volatile.
Right, we can cut it there.
Listen. Oh, I got to explain that. I can't just leave it there. Corner's the most unpredictable position in the league, I think, in my opinion, just because your entire performance in one game can be made on, one deep bomb. You get beat for one 80-yard touchdown. That's a bad game. And there isn't really another position like that where, other than safety, where, you can be susceptible to such enormous game-breaking plays like that. So he had one very good season in his first year as a starter for the Seahawks. And he was solid the previous year as well in a half season. But it's a small sample size. It's like I said, a volatile position. So we'll see. And obviously as a smaller guy too, he's already trying to overcome that. So we'll see if he can maintain that. But I guess corner is definitely a position where I think more so than any other players are susceptible to, having those, they'll break out and come right back down to earth because it's just, and especially just with the rules, it's such a hard position to play. Injuries too. And that is another thing with Reed. He doesn't have the best availability track record. So I think that's probably the thing for me. In terms of what he did last year, I didn't see that much that there is not to like. But it is cornerback, and we've seen a lot of examples of guys just fall off the map really quickly. So, and that's why I think it's good to not sign a Jackson or someone up to that level. And this is still a pretty big deal, but more affordable than that because it's just a very wildly fluctuating position.
Yeah, how do you feel about his fit in the system? Because I know there were a few beat reporters who were talking about him as like a great man corner, and then as you pointed out, that it's not really what the film shows. He shows that he's, obviously he played some man and he might have had some higher numbers, but he played mostly zone, and that's where you can really see his fit in this defense.
Yeah, I think he's a perfect fit really for that reason. I think he's the exact type of guy you want. Play cover three, have a guy drop back and play the deep third, or play curl the flat. Match stuff underneath. Like he does really good with that. And like I said, this run defense, it translates to the passing game. You could see him get downhill and make plays when he needs to. I think he's really good at recognizing concepts, passing them off, getting back underneath, getting enough depth, things like that. So I think he's a very good scheme fit. And it does both this signing and Whitehead. I think the two DBs who are, better suited, hanging back, playing off the ball, coming downhill, kind of lends towards their, very much trying to fulfill the background of Saleh and Ulbrich, that Seattle cover three sort of defense, and also what they did in San Francisco, that they're really trying to emulate that more so than, build their own thing, maybe expand off of it. Well, no, I think these signings really kind of lend the kind of show that they want to emulate those past two schemes that Saleh comes from.
Well, yeah, because you're saying because both him and Whitehead are significantly better in zone than man.
Yeah.
When Saleh, I know we've said this in the podcast a bunch, but it's like, Saleh's for the first iteration of Saleh's defense is that cover three Legion of Boom defense, very zone heavy. But it's vanilla. And then you saw him go to San Francisco with that type of defense. It got shredded, and he had to make a lot of adjustments, and hence came, they turned into a wide nine front, and hence came the 2019 Super Bowl season. And then when all the injuries happened in 2020, or actually after the Super Bowl, when he saw Patrick Mahomes, shred that defense in the fourth quarter, they brought in Tony Oden, who's the Jets defensive backs coach, to implement some more man coverage principles. And that's how you saw the type of defense they were in 2020, especially with all those injuries. Obviously, they played mostly zone, but there was still a few more man principles. And you saw that at times last year that on third and long, a lot of times you would see Ulbrich man up the defense. Do you think clearly these signings are signaling some sort of change? You'd have to hope that the Jets are going to make some changes to that defensive system. So you think that this is a sign that, okay, they're going back a little bit more towards zone coverage, getting away from that, lining everybody up on 3rd and 20, going man coverage, and just trying to go back maybe more to the roots of this defense?
Yeah, I really think so. And it's good to be adaptable within the season, with injuries, guys trend up, trend down, adjust to it. And I think they could have showed more of that last season, although we did get a little bit like with the Bryce Hall movement, but it was mostly stable. And I think they can be better adjusting in the season, but it's a scheme that's worked. It's a scheme that if you have talent, it's a very talent based scheme. That's what I think it is. If you have bad talent, whatever talent level you have, it's going to be accentuated. If you have bad talent, it's going to be exposed. That's what we saw last season. If you have good talent, I think it really, gets the most out of that talent and puts it on full display. So talent should be better. We'll see if they can get the most out of it. And I think going forward after this year, if it doesn't work again, hopefully then you could see some changes. But I think these two signings very much sort of signal that they're still committed to the core values of this scheme.
Yeah, and a little bit I've watched of Reed and some of I saw him manned up on Devontae Adams a few times, and he had some great reps. So it's not like he's a bad man corner.
Yeah, he's definitely not bad. It's just that's what he's used to. He's playing that role as a very zone heavy corner.
All right, last one, Jordan Whitehead. What are the potential pitfalls with him? Obviously, hard to hate the signing of a 24-year-old who's been very good so far. But obviously, last year was, I don't want to say like the breakout year, but obviously the last two seasons, obviously under Todd Bowles, he's really, really, really improved. But yeah, there some question marks in pass coverage in your eyes, or man coverage, or the usage? I mean, what are some of the things that could potentially be negatives for Jordan Whitehead?
Yeah, I would say it's in the passing game. I think there's a chance he could end up being the type of player where it's like, you know, he hits hard and that's cool, but also he gives up a lot of plays and coverage. And I'm not saying he will,
So he's
because
Calvin Pryor.
I had that name at the front of my mind, is like, should I put that on him? I don't really want to associate him with that.
I'll do it.
But you're playing into the segment, that's the point of this. This is where we're allowed to get that out. So I'm glad you did that for me. But I guess that would be the downside, that I have a hard time seeing him not being good at making big plays downhill, making those hard hits, tackles for loss, blowing up screens, because he's just been so consistently good at it even since he came into the league. But the coverage is, he could be exposed there, specifically in man coverage. He has a huge disparity between man and zone numbers, and it's been on a yearly basis. So it's not like it was just 1 year. It's pretty established that that's who he is. So I think he has gradually improved his coverage year by year. To last year, he's pretty good. So we'll see if he can maintain that. If he does, I think he could be a very good overall player. But there also is the potential that maybe he comes back down to earth in coverage, doesn't maintain that improvement, and he gives up a few big plays, and he gets remembered more so for that than the good plays he makes. So I would say coverage is certainly the downside.
Yeah, the safeties are always remembered for the bad plays and not necessarily the good plays. Although he is actually one of those safeties that will make positive plays. Like I know you were talking about this, where it's like a safety's biggest impact is a lot of times like the not giving up the negative plays. Right. It's not necessarily many positive plays, but Whitehead's a guy who is an enforcer, forces a lot of fumbles, makes big hits. Like he's a guy that's going to rally the back end of the defense. I guess the only concern you could have is that he is playing in a much different defense than he was running. He's the only guy they signed that is not going to be playing in a familiar system. So there are question marks, I guess, there. I'm curious to know the numbers on how often the Jets manned up their strong safety last year. I mean, like, because to me, it did seem like a lot of times, especially in those third longs, they went man coverage and you saw the safeties, in that spot. So do you I mean, obviously we're talking about how they might change it up, so maybe this won't be an issue, but when you look at it from that perspective, how many or what percent of his snaps do you think, if you're to look at how the Jets use their strong safeties last year, will be in man coverage?
Yeah, I don't have the numbers in front of me right now, but I'm
pretty
sure. No, I do have an approximation of it, but I think it was a little bit for Davis and May specifically. It was a little bit over 30% of their coverage snaps that they played man. I think Whitehead was about 23%. So they did a little bit more than what he's used to. And those numbers were slightly above average. Like some of the highest safeties in the league will be 40, maybe even up to 50%. Some of the lowest, 15 to 20. So they might ask him to do a little bit more, which might not be the best fit. Or, they adjust it to his skill set and bring it down a little bit. I think, that's the type of thing that I think is good coaching, adjusting just slight tweaks to your usage for the skill sets of your players. So yeah, I think the man coverage is certainly the downside here.
All right, Michael, I think, actually, before we get out of here, I don't think I got a really great answer on your one prediction. I think we did you talk about the re-signings and stuff, but I want a prediction, non-Jets free agent, because I think you're right. I think they'll bring back Flacco. Probably won't be immediately, but I think it'll take a few weeks. I think they'll bring back Flacco. I think they'll bring back Feeney. They'll sniff around LDT, but I could see him signing elsewhere. Like they'll bring back some guys. But outside of that, is there anybody else out there on the open market? I want a prediction, not just I want a prediction on somebody you think the Jets will sign. Is there anybody, or is there nobody out there that you really feel that strongly about?
Obviously there's no one I feel strongly about, or I would have said it already.
You think they go back to tight end? Because it could free them up on day 2 in the draft. If they don't sign another tight end, then you feel obligated that they have to take a tight end day 2. But if they sign a guy like Max Williams, who I know you're a big fan of, great blocking tight end, then maybe they can kick that can down to the 4th round, or maybe in the 3rd round, because they still probably want to draft. They probably want to draft a safety to compete with Joyner. They're definitely going to draft a defensive tackle, if not 2 of them. And maybe the fact that they didn't get DJ Jones or whatever, maybe they're taking a defensive tackle at 35 or 38. So And there has been some rumblings about the Jets still sniffing around the tight end market. So do you think that a guy like Max Williams maybe, or do you think that they're really, it's hard to predict where they'll go from here?
I mean, I could see another tight end. I just kind of feel like Williams is going to get a nice deal.
Yeah.
All right, I'm pulling up the free agent tight end list. I'm going to
Well,
pick the most.
just to qualify that though,
Okay.
Michael, he has been injured a ton.
Right. Yeah.
Williams, I don't even think he's played a full season, has he?
Not recently. I think he did early in his career, but definitely not within the past few years. But I was saying I was going to pull up the free agent tight end list and pick the first most random name that comes up.
Okay, well
and that'll be my
effective.
prediction. That's very quality analysis here.
Yes.
So here we go.
That's why you have to subscribe to Jets X Factor.
Exactly. Random.
He'll close his eyes. He'll close his eyes and point.
Okay, actually, I'm going to do just that. So I'm going to scroll down the list here.
Don't actually.
Let's see what name we land on. All right. Michael Pruitt from the Titans. There we go.
No, this is not how we're doing this podcast. All right, so you don't have one. That's fine. It's hard to predict.
I don't. Yeah, at this point, where it gets difficult.
I would say the one prediction I'm pretty confident is I think they bring back Keelan Cole. I know I just cheated because that's a Jets guy, but I'm just trying to think of actual predictions. I think he makes a lot of sense. We've talked about
Cole and Feeney. I feel good about.
Yeah, and Flacco. I think they'll bring back Flacco.
Yeah, and Flacco.
Do you think they make a move at kicker, or do you think they're going to try to stick with Pinheiro and then have they even brought back Pinheiro?
No, they haven't yet.
So yeah, they have to make a move at kicker unless they're going to draft somebody, right?
I guess we can throw that in. That's a Flacco, Pinheiro, Feeney, Cole.
So you think it's Pinheiro? You don't think there's anybody on the kicker market? I know we have that document that has those free agent kickers on it. If I can find it.
Moku was already re-signed. I believe Folk was signed.
Yeah, he was. So Joey Sly, Zane Gonzalez, Dustin Hopkins, Greg Joseph, Randy Bullock. Those are the guys you wrote down on the stock. Any of those guys appealing?
I think they'll just bring back Pinheiro. He has familiarity in the scheme.
Okay, sorry, that went over my head for a second. The Brant Boyer scheme.
Yeah.
I mean, Brent Boyer seems pretty content with just picking a kicker every year and trying to make it work, but that has not worked.
That's the only reason I don't expect it, because we have not seen them do it a single time. So the next big move, quote unquote big move, they make a kicker will be their first.
I think Amendola's on the roster though, so they do have.
Yeah, he is.
And the thing with Amendola is I actually did kind of see the ceiling with him. Like I did actually kind of see how it could work with him because that leg is just so strong. But man, I mean, you have to wonder where his head's at after he missed a few kicks in front of the home crowd. It was getting some boos. Yeah. I mean, but he could win it back in training camp. He puts in the work this offseason. All right, I guess that's a good place to wrap it up. I mean, obviously there's a ton to talk about, but we're gonna have to stretch this content out for the next 6 months or so. Free agency is always so fun. I mean, the draft is great, but the first 2 days of free agency, man, there's just not much that beats scrolling through Twitter every 15 seconds. And even if you're
different
not a fan,
than the draft. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, even if you're not a fan of the guy that they signed, even just seeing Adam Schefter saying the Jets sign, fill in the guy that name of, like, it's always exciting.
Right. And the difference with the draft is, and it's good and bad, like the draft is cool because it's a fixed event, it's on TV, it's something that's actually happening all in one place. But and the draft is cool too. I'm not saying it's worse or free agency is better, but I think what's cool about free agency is it just feels like the guys you're getting are more known commodities. It's like, oh, I know that guy. I know this guy. And I could actually see what he's going to bring to my team. Yeah. Whereas
and
a rookie is a complete, dice roll. You have no idea what he's going to do.
Yeah. And that notification bomb can just hit you whenever.
It's just like a ticking time bomb. It's like every time you see a new tweet, it's like, and it's just like the Titans re-signed their fullback or something.
All right. I guess we should get out of here. The one last thing, I know I keep saying last thing. I just feel like we should mention on this free agency podcast. How do you think free agency impacted you mentioned the draft. How do you think it impacted what they do in the draft? I know I alluded to it a little bit in the second round and how we see things, but do you agree that it's probably edge at 4? And then I won't put words in your mouth, but how do you see the first 4 picks being impacted based off of their free agency so far?
Well, I think the biggest thing is that the odds of Sauce Gardner at number 4 probably went down a little bit. I wouldn't completely rule it out because I still think he might be the BPA on their board
Does he
at that
make it
point.
past Seattle though?
And you know, well, I'm saying at 4, I think he might be out of play there.
Yeah.
With with the signing of DJ Reed. I mean, I could still see it, but I just think it's unlikely. So yeah, I think edge probability of 4, and O-line's a huge one too. With Tomlinson rounding it out, I think it's really hard to see them picking an O-lineman in the first round. So O-lineman, cornerback odds way down. Safety, I don't think changed because you still have an open spot. I'm not saying they will.
But I don't think they go Kyle Hamilton. I mean, I never really did think they would, but Hamilton was the strong safety. Hamilton, right. I mean, he obviously he's versatile, he's rangy, but I think ideally Hamilton would be your strong safety, and then you'd have maybe more of a center fielder at free safety. I'm not saying Hamilton can't be a center fielder, but I think with that athleticism, that body type, I think you'd want to explore playing him down in the box at times and blitzing him and getting creative with him. And I feel like Whitehead kind of rules that out a little bit.
Yeah, that definitely in terms of Hamilton, but I guess the free safety prospects you can maybe get in the second round, maybe that went up. But I think all this stuff is kind of pointing to, I really think edge probability of 4 went way up. Even if Kayvon's not there, it could be Walker, like you said, Jermaine Johnson. I don't think we should rule Karlaftis out of it. Ojabo even maybe. Hutchinson, if he falls. So I think edge at 4 is looking pretty likely now. And then at 10, I think receiver, or I wouldn't rule out linebacker if they really like Dean or Devin Lloyd. So yeah, I think this definitely has provided some clarity.
Yeah, I mean, the Jets have been very clear about wanting to build through the trenches and wanting to build a beastly defensive line. It's a great defensive line class, especially at the top. 4 is going to be an edge rusher. I mean, I don't want to jinx it, but I think it's, if you're a betting man, 4 is an edge rusher. And then 10, I think the probability of it being a receiver has gone up tremendously. Because I think now that they've signed an outside corner, like a legitimate starting outside corner, they don't feel the pressure to have to take a corner there. So they can go if they can. They might have their pick of the litter at 10 at receiver. It depends what happens with Atlanta. I think they'll probably take a receiver if they're there, but maybe not. And also maybe they'll trade for Deshaun Watson. So that's something to keep an eye out for. But I think it probably goes edge, receiver, interior defensive lineman, and then either a safety or a tight end, just depending on the board. All right, Michael, I think we've done a good enough job here. Let's wrap it up here. I think we'll probably do a mailbag maybe Sunday to Monday. I mean, if something else happens very legitimately tomorrow or Thursday, I guess we can do a podcast, but probably we'll do a mailbag Sunday to come out Monday or maybe Saturday. I don't know, depending on what happens. But thank you for listening. You can follow us at CYJ Pod on Twitter, Michael_Nania, and myself at Ben W. Blessington, JetsXFactor.com for the best place to go for Jets content. Michael, you left me hanging last time. Do you have something for me at the end of this episode? No? Nothing?
No.
No last words? Oh, come on. We can't.
I was going to go with complete silence, but I thought that was a little cruel.
Then I was going to have to cut that out. Yeah, no. All right, fine. Michael has nothing else to say. He is perfectly content and happy with JD.
I'm changing it up because usually I'll bring something up here and then it'll just go on a tangent to a whole new topic. And you guys don't deserve to be subjected to that.
Okay.
You've already done your time by listening to this whole episode.
Well, Michael, there you have it. We've said it all. 4 free agent signings for the Jets so far. Have to love what they've done. Joe Douglas. I don't want to say A+ because, you don't want to be too hyperbolic, but I think I look at this free agency as an A for Joe Douglas. Really happy about it. You should be too. You should be excited about the direction this franchise is heading in. And all signs for this podcast points towards talking about the draft. So excited to do some more draft work. We will be doing some podcasts on the free agents that they've signed individually, so keep a lookout for that. But now we get to shift gears from free agency towards the draft, so it'll get fun. All right. Thank you for everybody for listening. Have a great week. We'll see what else the Jets do this week, but we'll be back on Monday.